Welcome to Arizona Now and Then. I'm Ron Bellis. Well, we're going to talk about how to get fit, optimizing aerobic fitness. My guest is Joe Wozniak. Joe's been with us before, and we're going to talk again a little bit about what brought him to this situation and why he knows a little bit about what he's talking about. Because Joe's had a very interesting experience, not something we'd all would want to go through, but he's come out stronger than he was before. Joe, good to have you with us again.
Thanks, Ron. For having me back.
As again, you know, you have been here before, but I do want to go through again what you've gone through, your background. I know you're active in running and stuff, and then something happened to you about 8, 9 years ago. Would you kind of go through that so we can get the foundation and go on and talk about how we can help people get fit?
Sure. Well, Ron, back in early 80s, I was starting to get fit, and in fact, I started working with Dr. Art Mullen, and he's gotten a lot of people out there running. And in 1983, I did my first marathon in Honolulu. That was really one of the great places to go. And
that's a great place to start it.
Yeah, it sure was. And what I noticed was that I really wasn't as fast as other people. And lo and behold, in 1984, I was diagnosed with a very rare form of muscular dystrophy. It's very mild. So in my 30s, to be diagnosed with a rare form of muscular dystrophy was kind of a surprise.
A little scary.
There were times when you sit back and you say, gee, you know, why me? But that didn't last very long. We started to take a look at what we really can contribute. And
you said we. Okay, who's we?
Well, that was really a mistake on my part.
Okay.
It was really reflection on my part to take a look and say, what really could I contribute? You know, at first I had the normal reaction of, well, no, the doctors are not right, and you know, this can't be so. And fortunately, Dr. Mullen really encouraged me to go and do some fitness activities, because there were a couple of doctors who said, we're not sure that you really ought to be running anymore because it may do some long-term effect. So ever since that time, I was looking for, you know, what was the right level of fitness, what would work best for me. And then a couple of years ago, I found that there were available on the market these heart rate monitoring equipment. And so for over 2.5 years, I've actually been recording every one of my exercise sessions. And so I have the data on what my exercise sessions were. And the data was very fascinating. It was not understandable at first because I didn't really follow a lot what was in the books and things like that, for at least the way I was looking at it at the time. And so in the last year or so, I've started working with some other people, and we noticed there was a different pattern. And the reason why we're here today is to share what we've noticed, and because we think it will help a lot of people out there.
Okay. Now you say, almost 3 years ago, you found out this that there are a lot of ways to monitor your heart and everything else that you're going to be doing. So we're talking very high-tech stuff.
Yes.
In between the time when you found out you had muscular dystrophy, albeit mild still, nevertheless, obviously in some respects devastating, but obviously you've come through it pretty good and continue to do so. Did you do a lot of exercising still? I mean, did you really get even more involved in it, or what?
Well, some people would think so, because back in 1988, I did a 70-mile triathlon, which was a 1.2-mile swim in Swirl Lake and 56 miles on the bike in Fountain Hills, and then a 13-mile run.
Oh, yeah, they've shown that on TV here a lot.
And I've also done the El Tour de Tucson, which is over a 100-mile bike ride. I did that in 1990.
So this, of course, again, is after you were diagnosed.
Yes, after I was diagnosed, yes. It took me 12 hours to do the El Tour de Tucson, which was quite a long time to be out there. So what I found was that I didn't have the strength to be fast, but I was very persistent and could actually finish.
Yeah. Okay. All right, you got into this high-tech stuff, and you're able to monitor. Is it mostly just your heart, or is it other things? What else are you monitoring?
Well, in this case, we're really talking about the heart rate.
Okay.
Okay. Before I get into that, what I'd like to say to the people who are listening, that we're really talking about anybody who's been thinking about starting a fitness program, or people who are triathletes, and in particular coaches and trainers. I think they'll find it very interesting what we have to share with them tonight. Okay?
So this is really for anybody, even those that are active now, but also anybody that's thinking about getting active. So
yes,
hey, anybody with ears, listen.
Because I think what we'll find, what they'll hear tonight is some of the misconception that people have had about exercising, and a lot of people had some bad experience with exercising and getting burned out, and I think they might find one of the reasons why they've gotten burned out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good. Let's get into it then.
Okay.
All right.
So the starting place is the device that we actually record the heart rate. Okay. Now this particular transmitter actually gets right against the ribs, against the skin, And this actually has a radio transmitter that transmits your heart rate every 5 seconds to the watch. And it actually stores the data every 5 seconds and stores about 2.5 hours worth of data. And then when we finish the exercise, we go lay this on the computer device, and the data gets transferred into the computer. And so what you're going to see tonight is some of the printouts from the computer and some of the analysis that we've done.
Okay, good.
Okay?
And again, the exercising you're doing, the workouts are varied. It's running, it's
biking,
everything. Okay.
Yes,
So anything you can do physically, then you can basically do this.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what I'd like to point out is that this particular device is fairly expensive. It's over $500. And so most people would not invest in the one that record their heart rate. But there are heart rate monitors that people can buy anywhere from $100 to $250.
Okay.
So because the prices are coming down, they're going to find that they're much more affordable, and certainly what I'm saying is that it's probably a good idea to get one if they want to enjoy their exercise.
Yeah. And again, if they're really serious about training and things, other than just trying to get in shape.
Even if they're not serious about doing 10Ks, if they're really interested in enjoying their workout, because what we're finding is that people are doing too high intensity of workouts. And one way of actually controlling your intensity is having a device that says, hey, you're going too fast.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And again, okay, the printout's going to show that.
Yes.
Is that, as you've been able to be, I understand you're training somebody now to be involved in a long distance running and things like this. Is that something I guess we just want to run out and do it as fast as we can and tend to burn ourselves out? That's mental. It's not only physical, but it becomes a mental situation. So what I'm reading here is that if you've got monitoring equipment, it'll give you more of a positive mental outlook on what's going on. So you say, hey, I'm doing this wrong, let me do it right, and then I'll feel better physically and mentally.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, that certainly helps. Okay, go.
So the starting place is to understand your heart rate. Okay, there are certain things to understand that when you wake up in the morning before you actually lift your head off the pillow, that's called your waking heart rate. And so I've actually recorded for several years my waking heart rate, because athletes know that that's one of the ways of knowing whether you're overtraining or not, or whether you're getting sick or not. That will change. Okay, so that's part of the data that I collected in conjunction with my exercise data.
Is it always better to have a lower heart rate? Or I know you're not a doctor, but you're involved in the training of this, and you're learning some of the aspects of it. Is it always better as a trainer if you're training somebody, or somebody that's actually training yourself in training? Is it always better to keep that heart rate down, or are there times that it is better? Because we hear about, hey, you got to get your heart rate up to get rid of the fat in your vessels and veins and things.
Well, what we find is that the absolute heart rate is not as important as the fact that when you do start to exercise and do it properly, over a period of time, your resting heart rate will come down lower. Okay. As an example,
if you only get too low, then you're dead.
That's right.
Okay.
But you actually get pretty fit where your heart is actually pumping more per stroke, so it's becoming very efficient. So to give you some idea, my friend that I'm training to do the marathon, she's 57 years old, and she has high blood pressure. And she's hoping to be able to exercise so she can get off her medications. When she started out 2 years ago, her resting heart rate was 85 beats a minute. When I tested her a couple weeks ago, her standing heart rate was 50 beats a minute. Okay, so she's really gotten into, her heart is very, very efficient.
That's dramatic.
Yes, it is, very dramatic.
Well, again, exercise in a lot of ways can do so much good for you. And I guess more and more doctors are realizing that get them out of the hospital a bit faster, start them, get them moving around. And,
yes, that is correct.
And exercising, getting the muscles going, is going to be a great positive impact on you.
That is correct.
Obviously, this is certainly an example of that. Okay, so you've got this thing strapped to you. Oh, let me get back to the dollars first.
Sure.
Even $100 is a lot of money.
Yes.
Are there ways to monitor yourself without spending a lot of money? I mean, about a watch and this kind of stuff, or is that?
Well, what we're going to show today is a way that you can actually monitor the intensity of your workout without having a heart rate monitor. Okay. It's obviously not a heart rate monitor is better, but for the people who can't afford it, we at least have something better than what typically has been recommended.
Okay. Let's go ahead.
So what we're going to talk about is actually two different ways of which I've collected data. Okay. One is I have designed a particular treadmill workout for me that is this, so you're going to see some data for the same identical workout over a period of time. Okay. Now, that's one test. Now, everybody can't do my workout, and some people need to go faster, some people need to go slower. But the other test that we're going to talk about, which applies to everybody, is what we call a Conn-Conny test, where you gradually increase your heart rate on a treadmill or at the track, and you gradually increase, and the computer records your speed. So that when we'll do that, we'll see the analysis of some of those data, okay? But we're going to start off with an example of what you can accomplish in 7 weeks. Okay?
All right.
So for the average person, this data is my data, okay?
Right.
So what you see here, along here is the heart rate, and this is over time. So
How long a period of time?
this is 45-minute workout,
Okay. All right.
okay? And I'm going on the treadmill 4 miles an hour. That's about 15 minutes per mile, okay? And you see my heart rate kind of comes up and levels out, and then we finish the exercise and comes down. So this is back on March 21st of this year. This is after about a 3-month layoff. I'm sure there's people out there who've laid off from time to time, and we won't mention any names, Ron, but but everybody knows how that is.
I've been busy.
So the computer calculated that my average heart rate for that workout was 145 beats a minute. Okay?
Average for the 45 minutes.
For the 45
That's
minutes.
up, down, and okay.
Yes, okay. Now, the thing that's important to notice about this particular chart is that at the end, you'll notice that the heart rate drops off very, very quickly, okay? So one of the recommendations for the people at home is that when you're now finishing your workout, if you want to try and feel your pulse and calculate your pulse, that's probably not a very good time because it's dropping so rapidly.
Yeah, as soon as you stop, it drops.
It drops very quickly. So if you are using that particular method, chances are the reading you're getting is very low. It may be up to 10 to 15 beats a minute low. Okay? So what we're going to see as we go along, that there's a much better place over here, and that is it kind of lines out around 100 beats a minute. Okay? So we'll come up with a criteria before the show's over to help them guide themselves. Okay? So this is where I started. And then 7 weeks later, what I've done is I've taken and we've put on the same chart the one for March 21st and then the one for May 15th, which is 7 weeks later.
Okay.
So it's the same identical treadmill workout. I want the same speed. And what you notice is there's a line that's at 129 beats a minute. Okay, so we went 16 beats a minute less over the same speed, the same distance, and the same time. So you can see that if you now start to get trained, your heart will now pump more efficiently.
Is the last line on there the drop-off? I mean, that's even more dramatic.
Yes. And that's what happens as you get more fit, is that your drop-off comes much faster down to 100. Okay? So in the first case, it took about 11 minutes for my heart rate to come down to 100. In the second case, it was less than 2 minutes. So that was one of the things that says, hey, I was much fitter 7 weeks later.
Right.
Okay?
And you expect that, of course, but whatever you were doing was working.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I found is that 11 minutes for your heart rate to come down to 100 is a fairly intense workout. In fact, I found that it actually elevated my waking heart rate in the morning. So the guideline I've kind of come up with, if you're looking for a nice medium intensity workout, is to have your heart rate come down to 100 in less than 5 minutes. When you start getting above 5 and 10, it starts to become a fairly intense workout.
But is that always bad? I mean, say you want an intense workout, you're in a hurry to get into shape, or is that bad for you physically?
Let's take two categories.
Okay.
Let's take a person who's interested in getting in shape as fast as possible. What we find is people would like to increase that intensity. The problem is that they then have not recovered for the next day to be able to do the same thing.
Okay.
So you've got to
recovery,
balance.
yeah.
You've got to balance that recovery, okay? Now, there are some cases for triathletes and some high intensity that they do mix some very high intensity workouts with recovery workouts. But we're not going to get into those today. This is for people who just want to exercise every day and get into shape.
Right.
But you need to be careful of your intensity.
Okay.
Now we're going to switch to the this Conn-Conny test, where this is a test that I use for everyone else. I use it for myself, but this is the one that's standard. And it was developed by an Italian man named Conn-Conny, and he had found that when you increased your heart rate up, he measured heart rate, and he also measured blood samples at the time. And he found that there's a certain point where your lactic acid builds up and you can't really run as efficiently or exercise as efficiently. So he's correlated you'll see in the graph what we call the deflection point, where your lactic acid starts to increase very quickly. Okay? So the way the tests work is, in this case, we gradually increase the speed of the treadmill. As you can see, the heart rate kind of follows a straight line. And down here, the bars represent about every 500ths of a mile, or about 80 meters. Okay? And so this data itself just shows you how the test is done. The computer then analyzes the data, and we're going to see how that is on this next chart.
A reminder that lactic acid is not something, now that's a something that comes out of your muscles while you're working.
Yes. When you're working them very hard, in fact, there's a term for that, they call it anaerobic.
Right.
Okay? The sprinters run very anaerobic. Marathoners have to stay aerobic, otherwise they won't be able to make all 26 miles.
Right.
Okay? So there are some events that are aerobic and anaerobic, and then there's ones that are all aerobic. So we're concentrating today on aerobic. Okay? So what the computer then is, it draws a line with heart rate up here, and it calculates the speed. So what you notice is that those
Speed is what?
the speed of the treadmill.
Okay. Right. How fast you're going to run then?
How
Or
fast?
jog.
So this was the test that we just showed. This was the results. And what you notice is all the x's follow the straight line up until toward the end, and then it veers off to the right. Because you can see that x over there sticking way out there to the right. And so that's where the lactic acid is starting to build up. Okay. Now this happens to be a very fit person. This is a person who can run less than 8 minutes per mile. And they can do a 10K very, very quickly. Okay. Right around the 40-minute mark. Okay. So, so this is what's documented in the books, is you'll find very fit people. Now, when I started to look at the results, I found that it isn't this way for everybody. And this is what's significant for today,
right,
is to notice that it isn't that way for everybody. Okay. So what I'm going to show you next is some of the data from other people that I have. Okay. Now, we're going to step away from the Conconny test for the moment. Now, this particular chart is 11 different people that I've tested. It isn't necessarily statistically any particular way. It's just the ones that I picked as an example. Okay, there's actually 5 different kinds of people that I've put on this chart. Down here, the first 3 happens to be people who haven't exercised in some cases years. Okay, the next group, which now over here on the right, is how fast they're going at their fitness level, based on the Conconny test. The next group is people who've been exercising maybe once or twice a week, okay, maybe aerobics class. The thing that surprised me is that they weren't that much faster.
right,
Okay. The next group is people who are exercising more routine, and then these people over here have been exercising for quite a long time, a number of years. As you can see, they're going faster and faster. And the last person over here, going 11 miles an hour, okay, is an ultramarathoner. He runs 150 miles a week. Okay. So for the people, these last 3 people will show up on the Conconny test right along that straight line, very much following that pattern. Okay. So if they want to train aerobically, that means that they need to stay below that deflection point if they want to stay aerobic.
okay.
So that's the guideline for some of the people. Now, what I'm going to show you next is what happens, what does the chart look like for people who haven't exercised in a while. And what was curious about that was, I'm sure you maybe have noticed when you start to exercise that it isn't very comfortable.
Right. Other than the muscle pain. You mean it's other things too.
The muscle pain and whatever. And I happen to have a friend of mine who's hadn't exercised in years, and she says, Joe, you know, I hate jogging. It was like, I hate it.
Yeah.
And so she let me test her. And what's interesting is that you notice it follows the axis for a while, but instead of moving to the right of the line, it moves above the line. Okay. So this is what I'm finding is for the average person who has not been doing 10Ks and whatever, theirs deviates the other way. Now,
that's obviously bad. More lactic acid,
well,
what's this showing?
No, it doesn't show that at all.
That?
What this is showing is that if you increase the speed of the treadmill just a little bit, their heart rate goes up much faster.
Okay.
So now what's interesting here, this person went all the way to 160 beats a minute, and they were walking. So this is the good news for people, is that when you're first starting off, walking can get your heart rate up very, very high, and it's not needed. So when you're now exercising at the beginning, you can walk and get your heart rate as fast as you need to go. And so that's pretty exciting for people to know. And no wonder she hated jogging. If she jogged, it probably went to 180 beats a minute.
Yeah.
Okay?
Plus it was painful.
Yeah, it was painful. That is exactly right. Okay. Now, one of the other common things that happens, this particular person is in a little bit better shape. Now, you notice it's a little closer to the line, still above the line. And this is one of the other things that typically, I've had at least 2 people tell me this, that when they're starting off, they'll start off jogging for all 10 to 15 minutes, and they'll start to work up from there. They'll start adding time. But when they're finished with that 10 to 15 minutes, their muscles get tight and they get sore. And this was an example of one of those friends of mine who, when he would jog, his heart rate would get way high. Okay. So what we found was that his fitness level is really around 125 beats a minute. So what we did was we said, okay, now let's do an experiment. Let's set up the heart rate monitor and let's have you do a workout at the right level, between 125 and 135, which is right about where your fitness level is. Okay. And what was surprising is that not only was this person able to do all 45 minutes, but they said it was very enjoyable, okay, and they didn't get sore afterwards, and they
still got the proper exercise.
And they got the proper exercise.
And this is the results of that.
This is his workout, 45 minutes between 125 and 135. Okay, so this is an example now how the heart rate monitor can help you. It beeps when you go too low, so you got to speed up, and it beeps when you go too fast, so you have to slow down. And so in this case, he did all 45 minutes walking with just a few jogs, about less than 10% of the time. Okay. So this is typically what people will experience when they know exactly where they should be. Now, I knew where to set the limits because I tested him. Now, for our audience, for the people out in the audience who can't necessarily be tested and they want to have a heart rate monitor or check themselves manually, this particular person, it took about 4 minutes and 50 seconds for a heart rate to come down to 100, which is exactly where I was shooting for, less than 5 minutes, to give him the right intensity.
So this is going to be 2 things. One, he's training properly within his limits.
Yes.
And he's going to feel better about it and not be upset mentally and physically.
Yes.
He's not going to be negative about the experience.
Yes.
So you're going to, in the long run, it's going to be great.
And he'll improve faster.
Yeah. Speaking of 5 minutes, believe it or not, we got less than 5 minutes.
Oh, we got less than 5. Okay. Well, thanks for the warning.
Yeah, I want to let you know so you can pace yourself.
Sure.
Put the monitor on so we'll know.
Okay. So I'll skip those 2 for now, okay? What I wanted to show was for now the people who are not starting out, people who may be training for a marathon or whatever, okay? What I've done was, this happens to be my friend who's training for a marathon. What we did was we said, let's record what your long run is. This happens to be a 10-mile run, okay? What you'll notice is the zigzags up and down. This is before we told her to set the alarms on the, okay? Right. And what we found was that after 8 miles, she had to walk, okay? Now, I'm going to go a little fast here, but the key is that she couldn't do the whole workout, okay?
At that rate?
At that rate.
That speed, right?
At that speed. Now, the very next week, what we did, we said, okay, let's let the computer control your workout. The average heart rate is identical to this workout, so the average is the same, but you'll notice no ups and downs. It stays right in the limits. She was able to go all 11 miles at 30 seconds a mile faster. So that's pretty exciting for people who are training for 10Ks and long runs. Not only can they, if they control those peaks and valleys, they can actually stay a lot more consistent and get a better workout. And she enjoyed it. See, that's where the enjoyment comes in.
That really is remarkable, because you want to talk about efficiency in training,
yes,
let alone just the efficiency of your body, but the fact that you're really teaching somebody how they should run.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
Okay.
Again, high tech, it can be helpful again.
Now, for triathletes and whatever, there are endurance workouts, speed workouts, and strength workouts. So there are different kinds of workouts. So I don't want to be misled that this is the only kind of workout, but how it can help on the endurance workouts. Now, here's what's also exciting for the same person. Okay, we did 4 tests. These are the Concani tests now, where you can do the same test and find out have you improved. Okay, this was last December. She was a little over 3.8 miles an hour. This was in August when she started her training. this is in September, and this is in October. So we're now talking about an 8-week period. You can see every 4 weeks we've tested, and she's now shown improvement. So the methodology allows people to get that feedback, and that's why I say I think that coaches and trainers would be interested to give their athletes that incentive to be able to say, hey, we are in fact improving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than just feeling that you are, you can actually see it.
You can actually see it.
And of course, when you're talking statistics, when they're timing you, that is a statistic that you're interested in.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Got about 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for the. So now we're going to go back to some of the myths. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Let's finish up with the myths. How we can get rid of those and do better.
Okay. So one of the things I found. Now this is the same chart that I had before, but I've added some data. Now this line here is the speed at which the people were at their fitness level. Okay. And the bar represents their heart rate at which they were at that level. And down here at the bottom are the ages of people. So I have people from 18 all the way up to 57. I've got so what we want to show people is that that the heart rate versus your age, because a lot of people say you need to have a heart rate based on your age. That is not true. Okay, from the data that I've collected, what's more significant is what your fitness level is. And it's more individual. So at least the monitoring can now help you get your own individual, and rather than trying to read some chart, because if you read the chart, you may be too low, you may be too high. And I think the other...
okay, we've got about a minute, so let's finish up with the concepts we're talking about some of the myths and some of the things we can do real quick, less than a minute, how we can start and do it right. 2 things you'd suggest.
Okay. 2 things I would suggest. If they can afford a heart rate monitor, they should get one. And they should be taking a look at how long their heart rate comes down to 100 to judge their intensity. If it's over 5 minutes, they probably ought to back off. If it's under 3 minutes, they might increase a little bit. Okay, so that would be the guideline I would give them. This really applies where I think it's really important is when you now have high school track people. When they first start, you have people at all different fitness levels, and you go out and do the laps at the same speed. You know that somebody's dying out there going too fast and the other people are going too slow. So this would really help them if they start to take a look at their heart rate recovery and start to judge their speed based on that.
In other words, don't push yourself too. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good, Joe. Thank you very much for being with me. Joe Wozniak, we talked about optimizing aerobic fitness, how you can be better fit and train better. Thanks for being with us tonight with Arizona Now and Then. Stay tuned for more next week. Thank you. Good.